We all just got word yesterday that the manhunt was over. The escaped inmate and the corrections officer, former corrections officer, was captured in Indiana after a brief high-speed chase. We later learned that Vicky White had passed away as a result of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. There's been so much that's come out just overnight. I do want to add some clips where Dan Abrams is speaking with the local sheriff in Florence, Alabama, Sheriff Singleton. And then News Nation sat down with a criminal defense attorney and he explains what charges Casey White is now facing. As always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions on this whole story, and you already know I'm going to keep you updated with all the latest developments in this particular case, so be sure you smash that subscribe button and click that bell, the notification bell. Click it to all, that way you'll be notified every time I upload. Now we're going to hear the latest in this case.
I won the manhunt for Alabama Corrections Officer Vicky White and confessed murderer Casey White is over. Casey White is now in custody, and we have just learned in the last 20 minutes or so that former Corrections Officer Vicky White has died, a result of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. She had been taken to the hospital. The sheriff out there had been saying he was hopeful that she had survived, but we are now just getting confirmation that she has not. Officials saying that Casey White's condition is not life-threatening. This came after a high-speed chase in Evansville, Indiana, over 200 miles away from where it all began. The Lauderdale County, Alabama sheriff reacted this evening.
This is the press conference that we've been talking about all week that we wanted to call. Casey White and Vicky White are in custody.
That sheriff will join us live in a bit for his first reaction to the news just breaking that his former colleague Vicky White has died. Meanwhile, Indiana authorities who were on the scene of the capture talked about what led to this, first confirming why the U.S. Marshals were in that area.
They were here because a vehicle had been located in Evansville almost a week ago that appeared to be related to the Alabama escapee.
They then explained the new information that they gathered today.
As we were working on this today, we gained information that a vehicle matching the description of a suspect vehicle was near our sheriff's office. So the U.S. Marshals Task Force and deputy sheriffs went to the area. Soon thereafter, the male and female fled in a vehicle on Highway 41 northbound.
And that is what led law enforcement to finally catch up to them.
They came through this grassy area. The Marshals Task Force officers intercepted them, actually collided with them to try to end the pursuit.
And then they described Vicky White's final act before being taken into custody.
When this occurred, the female driver of the vehicle shot herself, and the passenger was injured, not too seriously. They've both been taken to local hospitals to be examined for their injuries. Her injuries are very serious.
Now again, since then, again, in the last 20, 25 minutes, we've learned that Vicky White has died. Police say the pair crashed the vehicle they were driving after that pursuit by officers. Law enforcement now believe that they had been in the Evansville, Indiana area for the last 6 days.
Why would people on the run stay in Evansville for 6 days?
Well, they're criminals. Sometimes they do things that are unexplainable. But in this case, I'm glad they did.
Now remember, inmate White and Vicky White had known each other since at least 2020, when inmate White was first transferred to the Lauderdale County Jail for an arraignment before being moved to prison. This was the moment they escaped. You can see Vicky White escorting inmate White out of the Lauderdale County Detention Center. She claimed she was taken to the courthouse for a mental health evaluation, but no appointment was scheduled. The pair left the detention center alone in her patrol car. Over the weekend, authorities also released this security footage of Vicky at a hotel front desk the night before she and Casey White took off. Then this afternoon, U.S. Marshals released these surveillance photos of Casey White taken from an Indiana car wash on May the 3rd, culminating in the owner of that car wash flagging authorities. Now, Vicky White would have been facing some serious charges in connection with this case. These are the charges that she would have been facing. And again, we had prepared these before the breaking news that she has died. So she would have been facing, you can see there, forgery, identity theft, permitting or facilitating escape in the first degree, etc., all connected in part the forgery and identity theft for using the false identity to buy that Ford Edge that was used to facilitate the escape. Joining us now is News Nation's Brian Enton and retired Tulsa Police Lieutenant Sean Sticks Larkin. Thank you both for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, Brian, I want you to take us a few steps back to how, not just the moment they captured them, but to the tip, how that led them there. Take us through how they ended up in this particular area.
Yeah, Dan, this was pretty wild. We were in Tennessee earlier doing some investigating on the case when we got a tip that something was going down in Evansville, Indiana. So we raced up here, and basically it all comes down to this car wash behind me. The manager here spotted a truck that he thought was suspicious, went and looked at his surveillance video here at the car wash, and he saw Casey White, and it was obvious to him that it was Casey White the minute he laid eyes on the video because the tattoos were a match, and it just looked like him. So he immediately called authorities. He called the U.S. Marshals. They came down here last night, reviewed the video, and everything just sort of fell into place from there.
But all right, so they see the video. They now know what, that they're in that area. But how do they then get the tip as to exactly where they were in the city?
So the manager here saw that they abandoned a truck at the car wash and got into a Cadillac or a Lincoln style sedan. So he was able to tell the marshals they left the truck and they are now in this kind of car, and this is what you should be on the lookout for. And he was told, don't tell anyone that's the car they're in now. We don't want that going public. We just want to look for them on our own in this area. And they actually spotted them in Evansville out near the airport, about 20 minutes from where we are, started chasing them. It was a high-speed chase. It went through several grassy areas in front of businesses, through almost a little river area. And then the deputies here did the pit maneuver. The car flipped over, and that is when Vicky White shot herself. And as you mentioned earlier, we've now learned that she passed away.
So they found this particular vehicle themselves, is that correct? So they now knew the type of vehicle that they were in, and the authorities, the police, armed with this information, now one of them spotted the actual vehicle?
Correct. Armed with the information that they had gotten from the manager of this car wash, that this was the car that they transferred into from a pickup truck.
Sean Larkin, we're often asked in the context of investigations why it's so important to keep certain things close to the vest, right, in terms of information in an investigation. It seems like this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and that was the situation with the Ford Edge initially. They didn't want that out to the public as well because obviously, these guys on the run, they're paying attention to the media as is everybody else. So if they hear, hey, they know the vehicle we're in, they're going to try to get rid of it. But Dan, as I mentioned to you before, I have a contact with the Marshal Service who is actively involved in this investigation, a former colleague of mine. And he exactly said that. He said tips from the public, as well as just good old-fashioned police work, is what led to them finding this car. A lot of times when the Marshal Service is doing their type of work, they're using technology, credit cards, cell phones. And these guys were not using these. They had to go to old-fashioned canvassing their neighborhoods, pounding the streets, and talking to the people out there, and it paid off.
But Sticks, talk to me about that, because we know that a lot of planning went into this, right? I mean, Vicky White went and apparently bought men's clothes. She, in fact, went to some sort of adult store as well before the escape. It seems she sold her house to make sure she had enough cash, etc. And then they end up for 6 days in Evansville, Indiana. I mean, from a strategic point of view, if she's planning this out, she's probably thinking maybe better to stay in one place than to cruise around too much. But it does seem like this woman who was involved in law enforcement, failed in her efforts to plan this out.
Yeah, obviously you want to minimize, being out in public when everybody across the country is talking about this case. And when they were spotted, they were actually at a hotel. From my understanding, the Cadillac was backed in at the hotel. A law enforcement officer spotted the vehicle. They suspected it was it, and they set up and started doing surveillance. And she actually came out of the hotel room first wearing a wig. So just as you were talking about, yes, there was a lot of planning, I think, to the escape, things that they did beforehand. But as far as once they got out, I'm not quite sure how much planning went into that because, $60, $70, $90,000, whatever the number was they had, I don't know how long they had planned to stretch this out or what their plans were for the future.
But are you surprised that they stayed in Evansville for the 6 days?
I think with the media coverage that was constant every single day and the fact that he stood out, being the size that he was, I think they probably were pretty smart trying to get to an area that maybe they have no connections to, no friends, no family, no associates, and do exactly that. They're paying cash for everything, so very difficult to track. Stay inside as much as you can, as long as you can.
Sean, before I go back to Brian, did your former colleague, tell you anything else about the moment that they spotted them and the chase, et cetera?
No, originally their plan was, they were formulating their plan on how they were going to approach having them, inside this hotel room. Because obviously you have what we call as an armed and barricaded type situation when you encounter these. And then they came out of the room on their own and ended up leaving, resulted in this 10 to 15 minute pursuit that, kind of as you discussed, ended once the Marshal Service used their vehicle to try to stop the pursuit.
Brian, you talked to the car wash owner who made the tip. Tell me about the conversation with him. I assume he recognizes now how important that tip that he provided was.
Yeah, he does. He's a humble guy, but he first spotted this on Tuesday or Wednesday, he says, the truck, and wasn't really sure what to think, and found the video and sort of pieced this whole thing together. But no, he's feeling pretty good right now. It's interesting. A lot of people on social media are sort of rallying behind him, saying that he should get the $25,000 reward. And I was just asking him about that a little while ago, and he's humble about it. But it'll be interesting to see if that plays out because he certainly played a key role in all of this.
All right, Brian Enton and Stick, stay with us because coming up, the sheriff of Lauderdale County, Alabama, standing by to give us his reaction to the news we've just learned that his former colleague, Vicky White, has died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The sheriff joins us live. Corrections officer Vicky White has died. Escaped confessed murderer Casey White is now in custody. The breaking news about Vicky White coming about 3 hours or so after it broke that the two had been involved in a crash with the authorities who had been chasing them. They'd been on the run for almost 11 days after she helped him walk out of the Lauderdale County, Alabama jail. The Lauderdale County, Alabama Sheriff, Rick Singleton, joins us now. Thank you very much for coming back on the show. We appreciate it. All right, so I know that you had wanted answers from Vicky White, but your reaction now to the news that she has died?
Well, it's obvious now that the questions we had will never get answered. I found out about Vicky's demise just shortly before we came on the air. In a facility like ours, a small facility, I think we got 48 employees in the detention center. She was the second in command. She knew every employee down there. And it's like family. And in spite of all that's transpired, I know our employees are going to take this very hard. She was a friend to them. We're still awestruck as to why she would have pulled a stunt like this. As I said, we'll never really know now. But I'm certainly want to send my condolences out to her family. Her mother has just been through a tremendous amount of stress and pressure the last few days. They love their daughter, and we just unfortunately it turned out like this. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me. My concern was that Casey White would kill her. But I also, in the back of my head, the last week and a half, I've been concerned that if they were both caught, that this might happen.
Tell me why you say it doesn't necessarily surprise you that she did this?
Well, knowing Vicky, I don't, and the part she'd be facing coming back, and I think more so than facing the charges, I think facing her family and her coworkers. I think, I was just concerned that that would really weigh on her, and that, if it came down to a situation like it did today, that this would be the result.
And the answers that you were seeking, what sort of answers were you looking for? I mean, the why would she do it, et cetera. It is starting to seem clearer and clearer by the day exactly what happened here, right?
It is, and yes, because the last 17 years, and y'all have heard me say it numerous times. I mean, she has an unblemished record. She was voted for the last 7 years. She was voted the Supervisor Employee of the Year. This year, next week, when we present our annual awards, this year she was voted the Corrections Employee of the Year. So, it just come as a total shock to her law enforcement family here in the sheriff's office. So I just don't know how to explain it.
So what do you do now, and I hope this doesn't sound like an obvious question, but what do you do now to make sure something like this never, ever happens again?
Well, I wish I could sit here and tell you for 100% guarantee it won't. You don't know people. We've been working with Vicky White for 17 years. We thought we knew her. We thought she was trustworthy. We thought we could have full confidence in her, that, that we could count on her to do the right thing. And for 17 years, she proved to us that that was the kind of person she was. So, we have the policies in place. I can tell you this, Casey White will eventually come back to our facility to stand trial for these charges. But I can assure you, I don't care if we are crowded, we'll crowd some of the other cells a little more, because he's going to be in a cell by himself. And he's going to be handcuffed and shackled 24/7. And, I'll probably be hearing from a civil rights attorney about that, but I don't care. He's not going to get out of this facility again.
It sounded to me initially when we had spoken previously like you kind of, you wanted to be angry at Vicky White, that there was fury about what had happened. But now that she's died at her own hands, that, you don't have that opportunity anymore. And now you're grieving a bit.
Yes, but I'm still very angry. I'm angry at Vicky, and I'm angry at Casey White. He obviously put in a jailhouse fashion, put the move on her. This is just not something we would have fathomed that Vicky White would have done. So, yes, I'm very upset and angry at both of them.
Yeah. All right, Sheriff, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it. I know this is a tough moment for you, just finding out in the last few minutes that Vicky White had died. I know it's an emotional time, as we've talked about, a lot of conflicting emotions going on at one time, completely understandable. But here, the good news is, and I'm going to repeat something that you said at the press conference a few hours ago, this is the press conference you wanted to hold. You wanted to announce that they had been captured.
Absolutely, Dan. And I cannot thank the media, especially the national media, enough. Y'all played a major role in bringing this to an end, getting the information out there for us, keeping it hot, keeping people alert to it. And it ultimately paid off. I always felt like it would be a tip that we would get from some citizen that would lead to this day. And we certainly appreciate the gentleman at the car wash for being alert and attentive and stepping up to the plate and giving us that one piece of information we needed to bring this to an end.
Sheriff, thank you very much.
The fugitives who were captured, or rather found, and this jailbreak that we've been following for days now. We have Kelsey Kernstein here, of course, and we also have criminal defense attorney Matt Fakuri. He's here to talk about exactly what we can expect next for Casey White. But we want to start with Kelsey right now. Kelsey, you actually went inside that Alabama community and inside that jail where Casey White was being held, where Vicky White worked. for the people who live in this community, I mean, it's a small town, right? They're not used to something like this.
This is a town of about 40,000 people. I mean, this is more media than they've seen in quite some time. They're absolutely shocked that any of this would have happened. But I also had a chance to speak with an investigator last night who said that Casey's, this is what he, quote, Casey's elevator don't go all the way to the top. He's not playing with a full deck of cards from the time he was a child. Now, all the investigators that I spoke to says this is not a sociopath, said that this is a mentally unstable person who is very dangerous when he's on drugs. And by drugs, I was told that that drug choice is meth. And I've also heard that Casey is kind of a big teddy bear. That's what I've heard from multiple investigators, which is interesting to point out. But I have to point out that Casey White was in the Limestone County Jail or the prison for 75 years. It's kind of an unusual sentencing. He got 75 years in prison. This is 3 consecutive charges of 25 years. That's a crime spree that happened in 2015. We know that he invaded a home. We know that he shot at people. He hijacked cars. But then while he was in prison, he wrote a letter confessing to cutting Ridgway's throat.
Ridgway is a woman.
Is a woman.
That he killed, Connie Ridgway.
Yes.
That he confessed to killing.
Yes.
Years ago, like in 2015 or something.
He is suspected of killing her. He had a confession, but it's interesting to point out that some of his confession does not match what actually happened. She was hit by a hammer, as well as her this is graphic, her throat was slit. But he did not say that he hit her with a hammer. So there's just a lot of questions.
But he did say that he killed her.
Yes. But he also said in the Limestone County Jail that he killed other people. They went to go look for the bodies. They never found them.
Yeah, clearly, again, Matt, this is somebody who has a long criminal history. It's somebody who's been troubled since their youth. And when you use drugs, I mean, there can be a whole bunch of stories that you create in your mind. But what, in terms of the legality of this case, he was already awaiting trial on this case involving Connie Ridgway, this woman that we're speaking about.
Correct. So he was already serving a sentence of 75 years for the offenses that she just mentioned. It was a robbery, it was attempt murder, and various other violent offenses. In addition to that, he has a pending capital murder charge. So that was set to go to trial in June. It'll probably be delayed, but it's a capital case. It's a death penalty case. Now he's facing these charges. These charges will be escape. It'll be forgery and identity theft based on the accomplice liability. It could be fleeing and eluding. It'll be conspiracy and several other charges, possibly even on the federal level as well. So he's in a world of trouble right now. But to be very candid, the capital case is more serious and serves more of a serious penalty, obviously, than the current charges he will be facing.
So that's what my question was. Does it even matter? I mean, do any of these charges, escaping his cell and going off on this, you know, this evading of officers, does that even matter when he's facing 75 years from previous charges?
Well, it always matters. He has to be held accountable for his actions in this incident. However, it's not going to be as serious as far as a penalty is concerned compared to the capital charges. Again, he's already on a 75-year sentence. I don't know what they're going to charge him with for this escape charge, but I doubt it's going to reach the 75-year sentence. And I don't think any of these charges are going to be capital-based. Typically, murder is the only capital. Sometimes sex offenses are, but he's charged with murder, which is a capital-based offense. None of these offenses, the escape, the forgery, anything else that they might conjure up on him, is going to be a capital case.
But what about in terms of where he'll be now confined? Because clearly there's something that's going to have to change at this Alabama detention center. And I'm sure they're having all kinds of meetings to discuss how Vicky White, that corrections officer, was able to just leave. Essentially, you know, nobody stopped her, nobody questioned her. Would he be detained back at that facility, do you think, or would he go to some sort of, you know, higher security federal location?
No, well, first of all, they're going to have to extradite him. So if he's still in Indiana, which I think he is, he'll be there probably for a couple days until he's extradited back to Alabama. Once he goes back to Alabama, he's going to be charged in that county. He's essentially going to have to stay in that facility. What I expect is that there'll be very high security measures and precautions to make sure he doesn't go anywhere, but he'll be back there.
And Singleton also said last night...
You're talking about the sheriff again.
The sheriff. Sheriff Singleton said he plans to have him handcuffed and shackled morning through the night. And that's even if a civil rights attorney has to get involved.
Well, like 24-hour surveillance
24 hours
at this
a day.
point. It's just, he had nothing to lose, is what Sheriff Singleton told us early on in the days of this manhunt. But in terms of a defense for whoever's representing Casey White, is there a defense?
There's always a defense. This defense, I think, would be based on his mental capacity, his possible lack of medication, and apparently his drug use, his self-medication with meth or whatever it is. It doesn't sound here, and I don't know if I have enough to say this, but it doesn't sound like he was the mastermind here. It sounds like he was more manipulated. They're probably going to base a defense theory on that. It sounds like maybe Vicky White was more of the mastermind behind this. He sounds like more of an impulsive guy based on his mental health history, based on his drug use. It sounds like he's more reactive. So if there is a defense, I think it would be based on something like that, based on the fact that he wasn't really the mastermind behind this and he has a mental health issue.
And then, of course, once we dig into this case a little bit, it could be seen that they both manipulated each other for different purposes.
Yep.
We'll start the conference quickly here. Before we introduce what has happened over the last 24 hours, I'd like to introduce people who've been involved in this since yesterday. It's Gabe Guerrero, he's the Great Lakes Task Force Deputy Commander. Southern Indiana U.S. Marshal Dan McClan. Steve Lockyer, our coroner. Chief Billy Boland. Assistant Chief Phil Smith, and ISP Justin Dean, who's part of our task force. As everybody knows, we're here today because we were seeking out this particular fugitive from Alabama who had been in on a capital murder offense and had been in Evansville for approximately 1 week. We were fortunate to have cooperation from law enforcement from Alabama, Mississippi, our U.S. Marshal Task Force, which is comprised of members of the Sheriff's Office, the Indiana State Police, and the Evansville Police Department, and the U.S. Marshal Service. Because of all the resources, we received a lot of tips. We got some good surveillance videos that showed a pickup truck that had been left at a car wash, and then a subsequent vehicle that they took and escaped in from the car wash, which is a Cadillac. We recently found out that they'd been staying at a hotel down the road here. It used to be a Motel 6, and now I think it's changed names, and they'd had a 14-day stay there. We were fortunate that during our investigation yesterday, an Evansville police officer who was just doing his good diligence of patrolling and being smart noticed the vehicle in the parking lot of the hotel and notified us immediately. So the task force members got together, they drove down there, set up surveillance on the hotel. Soon thereafter, the two suspects exited the hotel and fled out of the hotel parking lot northbound on US Highway 41, turned in at an industry known as Anchor here in Evansville. They went through the parking lot, went through a grass field. The members of the U.S. Task Force basically rammed the vehicle and pushed it into a ditch. And we later found out, had they not done that, the fugitive was going to engage in a shootout with law enforcement. So by our quick thinking, our actions, sometimes people may call that unnecessary action, but that action may have saved many of my deputies and fellow law enforcement officers' lives. And that's why I represent the Sheriff's Office. I want to bring my people home, and I don't care about the fugitives' lives if it protects my people's lives. And here, I commend them for a job well done. They knew they were going up against a dangerous felon, a murderer, and we have photos of the weapons that were located in the vehicle. There were at least 4 handguns, semi-automatics, 9mm, and this is known as an AR-15, which shoots a .223 caliber round. So any one of these weapons could have been used to ambush our officers while they were attempting to capture a murder suspect. So I commend them for the quick and aggressive action. It probably saved a lot of chaos by doing quick action there. Once the vehicle crashed, the female suspect shot herself. The male suspect gave up when we approached the vehicle. They were both taken out of the vehicle. Life-saving measures was attempted on the female, but she suffered a grave injury and subsequently died at the hospital last night. We interviewed the suspect for quite some time. I don't want to get into all the details of that because some of that may be used against him, but we have him presently in our Vanderbilt County Jail. He signed a waiver of extradition to go back to Alabama. I've notified the sheriff there, and they are going to make arrangements to pick the suspect up and return him to the state of Alabama. Due to safety and security measures, we won't be divulging that to you. It won't be a public spectacle. When he leaves, they'll go out a hidden exit, and it won't be for public display. So we won't divulge the date and time when the Alabama authorities take the prisoner back to Alabama. Once again, I can't shout out enough praise to all the law enforcement here in our community for the hard work that they do. The task force, I was asked by a member of the media this morning if this was like an odd occurrence, and it's certainly not an odd occurrence. We arrest dangerous felon subjects every single week. We've been involved in multiple shootings in this community. We've shot people, we've been shot at. So this is law enforcement. This is today's law enforcement. It's a very dangerous occupation. So I hope the public realizes what we do is dangerous, and we have to take action to protect ourselves so each and every one of these fine men and women go home to their family and their loved ones, and we don't let the criminal win the war. So I appreciate you being here. That pretty well wraps up what I have to say. We have multiple members here. If anybody wants to add to what I said, you're welcome to do that. If anybody has questions they want to ask off this, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Two questions, Sheriff. First of all, we know that Vicky White had $90,000 in cash with her. Have you located that money?
Yeah, we got a photo. They had about $29,000 left over. Here's a picture of the money that was left in the vehicle that we counted last night after we inventoried the vehicle.
And my second question, sir, James, the manager of the car wash who first called police about the truck, will he be receiving the $25,000 reward?
Now, I don't know anything about the reward.
Is there anyone here who could address that? It seems like he sort of solved it.
But that would be something that we'll deal with. Right now, that's not on there.
How did they get the F-150 in the Cadillac?
What's that?
How did they get the F-150 in the Cadillac?
They purchased the F-150 and drove it here. And where they got the Cadillac, I'm not sure at this point.
Sheriff, do you have any idea what they were doing here for?
Well, I think he said that he was just trying to find a place to hide out, lay low, and they thought, they'd driven long enough, they wanted to stop for a while, get the bearings straight, and then figure out their next place to travel.
Do you get any indication that they were visiting anyone potentially at this
No,
hotel?
we don't believe they have any relatives, friends, or acquaintances in Evansville, Vanderbilt County.
Is there any dash or body camera video of the incidents yesterday?
There may be some dash or body camera video. We haven't got that far yet for examining and releasing.
What about surveillance from the hotel?
And there may be, but like I said, that's a lot further into our investigation.
Sheriff, can you please speak to James Stinson, who called apparently on Tuesday to report not only the truck but also the scene images of Casey White with tattoos on his arm, and was told there's nothing we can do right now. It's not reported as a stolen vehicle. Those were his words. Why did it take so long to get a response?
Well, I'll let the police shoot that.
So I'll back up just a little bit. On May 2nd, we had an officer on the evening of May 2nd proactively driving through lots, and he was running plates just to see if they were stolen. He actually was the first one to run this plate on the evening of May 2nd, and it didn't come back stolen, didn't return anything. On May 4th, we got the call to the car wash, and the first officer went out, and the caller was not on scene when the officer was there. We do have body camera footage of the officer running the plate, looking in the car. He ran the VIN number, and then he left because it was an abandoned vehicle that we can't tow that. It would have to be 48 hours at the owner's request of a place before we can tow it off private property. But the owner of a residence can choose to have it towed on their own. He called back a couple hours later and had not seen the officer on scene, so we sent another officer back out met with him. The second officer that went out also ran the info and explained the process to him, that we would have to wait 48 hours before we could tow it, but if he wanted to tow it on his own, he could. And that's when they towed the vehicle, was on May 4th after that second run. From everything we've seen, there was no mention that this was connected to Alabama. On the 911 gives hope, or 911 audio, there was no mention that it was connected to Alabama. So at that point last week, there was no tie at all to this being involved with anything out of state. There was no mention to it being connected with them. So it was just an abandoned vehicle for us at that point.
Did Casey White why he stopped at the car wash?
No, there's no reason. He just happened to go in there like he decided to use the vehicle.
Can you clarify the 14-day stay? They were only gone for about 11 days, but you said a 14-day.
He had paid 14 days to stay at the hotel.
You paid in advance?
What's that? Yes, yes.
Sheriff, did he give you any sense of an end game? Did they have somewhere they were headed?
Say that again?
Did he give you any sense of an end game, a place that they were headed to?
No. No, they said they were just trying to contemplate where they could go and kind of be discreetly away from the public's eye.
Did she?
Disguises with them?
Wigs. They had multiple wigs.
Sheriff, presumably he was in this area since the day. You're in this area presumably since May 3rd, almost a week. What other interactions have you been able to trace? If they were here that long, surely there were other businesses or whatever that they would have.
Well, to that point, just like yesterday, there's hundreds of tips that come in. Someone claims they've seen the suspects, but we've had people claim they saw them in Richmond, Indiana, and we just go through every single tip. But from my standpoint, we've got the case solved. We've got a person deceased. We have another person in custody headed back to Alabama. That's my concern.
Hey, Sheriff, when we hear that when he was getting pulled up, when he was coming out of the car, he said, "My wife is dead and I didn't do it." Do we know if that's true, and were they married?
They were not married. They shared the same last name. And our preliminary investigation, we don't believe he shot her, but once the coroner examines the body with pathology, he can make a determination of that.
Sheriff, how do you know that he was aiming Casey White to have some sort of violent confrontation in place? Obviously, you showed that arsenal of weapons that was inside the car. Did he express in your interviews with Casey any desire to do that?
Yes. He said that he was probably going to have a shootout at the stake, and both of them losing their lives.
Sheriff, did they have a plan? Were they trying to get somewhere? Obviously, he wanted to escape.
Their plan was pretty faulty, and it failed.
Did he say anything about why she shot herself?
Well, no. And once again, what was going through her mind, I have no idea.
Sheriff, did he express how long that relationship had gone on between the two?
And that's under our investigation. We're not going to divulge that right now.
Sheriff, did he express any remorse for her death?
No.
Did you get the sense they were actually doing this together? He was not forcing her in any way?
Right. No, he was not forcing her. It was a mutual relationship.
Sheriff, can you clarify where she shot herself?
Well, we'll let the coroner talk about that after the pathology.
When is that coroner's report expected?
Well, we think this afternoon.
Well, we're going to initiate this.
Yeah. So the autopsy will be conducted this afternoon, and they'll put a report out when they're ready.
Hey, Sheriff, if you don't know how they got in the Cadillac, how did you guys know to look for a Cadillac?
No, we saw the Cadillac in surveillance video at the time they ditched the pickup truck when they left it.
Is he cooperating with you facing the charges here?
We're not going to charge him here. He has much more serious charges in Alabama. We want to get down there and let them take care of it.
Were any drugs found, Sheriff?
We haven't found any drugs in this case.
Sheriff, you run a jail. How do you feel that somebody that's working in jail, or not in jail, but somebody that's working in jail did this?
Well, it's certainly an unpleasant thought, and it's kind of shocking that somebody would do that. But remember, they're human beings, that they have their own minds, and for whatever reason, that they've developed some type of relationship. It's startling, but you know, they're humans, make mistakes.
Sheriff, how many law enforcement vehicles were damaged?
Maybe 3 at most. And that's a small price to pay to stop a murderer.
Were any officers hurt?
Just one had a slight head injury from banging his head inside the vehicle, but he's okay.
Where did she get the gun that she used on herself?
What's that?
Where did she get the gun that she used on
Well,
herself?
I have no idea. If she could have had one from her agency, they could have stolen some, they could have bought some, and that's where we're got a piece of the gun. If you want to look, here's the pictures of the vehicle. Here's his and hers vehicle here. and this was a ditch that really nobody knew, including the suspects. But this ditch actually helped us in the pursuit, because as they forcibly rammed the vehicles, it turned over on its side, and that disrupted his plan to try to have a shootout with law enforcement. And he even made that statement.
I want to ask you, this has been a whirlwind couple of days for law enforcement here in Evansville. I know some things like this don't happen very often. Can you speak to that, just kind of what this was like for your department, as well as maybe really who we're trying to get here, the members of the Evansville Police Department, and maybe the collaboration between everyone here?
Well, you ever, in law enforcement, you can be a town like in Posey County where a deputy was shot in the head. You can be in New York City, you can be in Evansville, Indiana. Crime's everywhere. Unexpected crime, violent crime is everywhere. So we never go to work thinking we're not going to encounter an unusual or serious situation. That our task force members routinely go out and arrest violent felons, murderers, and they get shot at, and they get attacked, they get resisted, we get involved in pursuits. We're in a very dangerous occupation. And Evansville, Indiana is a fairly large community. I think people forget that. We're 180,000 people, and we're a hub of a very large demographic area, so we serve a population base of over 350,000 people. And it's conducive for criminal activity. And we have to be prepared for that every single day.
Sheriff, do you know anything about the provenance of any of those weapons? Is it possible that any of them were part of her service as a corrections officer?
It could be, but right now we will continue our investigation, but that's the least of my worries at this time. But we will try to find an origin for each and every one of these weapons.
And during his cooperative interview last night, did he say anything along the lines of who planned this and how much planning went into it?
Yeah, but I'm not going to get into the interview with the detectives.
What about the money? Where did the money come from? Do we know that?
Well, she supposedly maybe sold a home before she left town and got a large sum of money.
Was there? I'm sorry. Was there any negotiation with Vicky before she shot herself?
Was it what?
Any negotiation? Did you have any communication before she shot?
I think she may have had a little bit of communication with our dispatch, possibly. I wasn't aware of it 100%, but I think she may have been talking to our dispatch.
Was
Sheriff,
Casey
is that
White
a,
injured?
Police ordered issued taser there in that photo.
That's from her duty belt. This is her duty belt she wore as a confinement officer, correction officer in her home state of Alabama.
Hey, Sheriff.
She just took that with her when she left.
And were those in the hotel room or the car? The guns?
Was she
In the
wearing
car.
that belt?
In the car. They were in the vehicle.
Hey, Sheriff, after you guys seen the initial video at the car wash, what was the indication? How did you guys figure out that they were still maybe in the area?
Well, it was a long, drawn-out process, like the police chief said. It's just bits and pieces of information kept coming in and tying things together. And it wasn't until over the weekend where it looked like more possibility they had been here for sure. And once again, after 6 days, it was just hard to believe they were here. I wouldn't think somebody on the run would stay in a community like Evansville for 6 days. But we brought the resources in and continued our investigation based on the information we had.
Sheriff, following up on
As far
that.
as in the jail right now, is he being held in the general population or is
No,
he
he's just in a holding room.
Now, they were at the hotel for quite a long time. Is there any indication at all that maybe the clerk or someone who works there knew it was them? I mean, this is a nationwide manhunt. Could they have possibly been threatened?
Well,
or-
I mean, we don't have any reason to believe that right now. But once again, we're less than 24 hours in this investigation. We have a lot more of the puzzle put together.
Well, how
Was
many days
Casey-
was it for meetings at the hotel?
Just yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. A
Was
very
Casey-
short window of time.
Was Casey White injured yesterday, and how?
He had a couple bumps and bruises from the crash.
Sheriff, can you confirm that there was a Facebook video that was circulating at a side angle of the arrest actually taking place? Can you confirm that it was Casey White in that video?
I haven't seen the video, but Casey White was at the scene, so you got that for sure.
Presumably. Also, can you get JPEGs of those posters so that we can actually have a digital version of that when you're showing us?
Possible.
Sheriff, what was the approximate amount of time after the crash that Vicky shot herself?
I think it was almost instantaneously. Before our deputies and task force members got to the vehicle, she shot herself.
I know you said it used to be a Motel 6. Can you just say the actual name of the hotel they were staying
I got
at?
it. Motel 41.
Is that nearby?
Yes, probably less than a mile south of here.
North. David's actually to your left.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. To the left. I'm sorry.
Was that F-150 pre-purchase
She had bought that vehicle.
Can we see the money?
in Tennessee or Alabama?
I don't know where she may have bought it in the state of Tennessee. I'm not sure.
But did she purchase it ahead of the escape like the other vehicle?
No, I think after.
Sorry, the marshal said that car was actually purchased by Casey White for $6,000 in Tennessee, same day they escaped. Is that not accurate?
That's probably accurate.
Sheriff, can we see you hold the shot of Casey one more time? Thank you.
Everybody okay with that? And I know you've asked a lot of questions, and as the sheriff, I think they're good media-related questions, but we're trying to take dangerous people off the street. There's a lot of where they bought the car and where they did this and that is a minor concern versus us getting them off the street and making our community safe. Now, this investigation will go on maybe for weeks, and we will uncover things in the future that we don't have at this time. But like you said, we're less than 24 hours from the time that we were involved in pursuit and a serious crash and somebody losing their life.
Sheriff, which agencies are involved in the investigation at this point?
Several. We have the United States Marshal, the Indiana State Police, the Evansville Police Department, the Vanderbilt County Sheriff's Office, many members of law enforcement from Alabama, Mississippi, some members of the FBI, and probably agencies in between. So there's plenty of agencies involved.
Sheriff, as someone in law enforcement or any of the people behind you who are involved in law enforcement, in your mind, what about her assistance in this? 17-year veteran of a corrections facility. How did that assist? How did that help this take so long?
I'm not understanding your question.
As someone involved in law enforcement, Vicky White had a 17-year-long career as a corrections officer. Presumably, that had something to do with why it took so long, over a week, 11 days, for this to come to an end. I'm asking, with her expertise, have contributed and how?
No, that has absolutely no merit to what went on. Zero.
Sheriff, I'm sorry. The photos that you released today, are they going to be posted on your Facebook page or?
We'll have photos available for media later.
Thank you.
Does anybody else need to comment? Have anything want to say? If you have any questions of the other law enforcement leaders here?
Sheriff, would it be possible to see the vehicles?
No, not to see the vehicle in person. What's that? I don't know if we do. If we do, we can maybe release that. That's not a big deal. It's a wig, a standard wig. This? Oh yeah, sure. You guys want to take this over there?
Sheriff, I know it's a weird question. Was it a black wig, long, short? What was she wearing? She's
I think there was multiple wigs, maybe reddish and blonde. Yeah, you wouldn't look good at it. Well, we thank you. If everybody needs any other questions from anybody was mingling around for a while. And once again, keep in mind, less than 24 hours, there's a lot of questions that won't be answered until we have a much deeper investigation, get all of our notes and material together, and we also have privileged information that we can't share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you.